I, Cantus Naravan Dracovin, Lord and Emperor of the Dracovin Empire, welcome! It is time to continue where I left off, talking about the history of Magic the Gathering. I was talking about the Rath cycle, the Tempest block, effectively. And I'm going to be introducing you to the last set in the Tempest block, Exodus. Now, Exodus was released in June 15th of 1998 and had 143 cards. Now, it introduced no new keywords, no new mechanics, but it expanded upon all the previous ones that the Rath cycle had been building up upon. Now, the symbol on the set was a bridge, which represented the exodus, or the leaving of Rath, the bridge to another world, the portal that would be taking them away from this plane. Now, there are some things that changed on this card. Card designs, which lasted until 8th edition, where it was overhauled again by a little bit. The first one is, of course, the set symbol. The set symbol became color-coded to mark the rarity. The first one, if it was a common one, it would be black. If it was an uncommon, silver. And if it was a rare, gold. So that was the first bigger change. The second big change, collector's number. It had two numbers at the bottom that represented both the number in the set and the total number of cards in the set. So the first number, as I said, would be the number of what card this would be in the set collection. The second one, how many total cards in the set. Now, the numbers and the cards were arranged both alphabetically and by color. And it started by color in the color wheel. It went in that order, starting with white and going around. After, they would do gold cards, followed by artifacts, followed by lands, adding into the end. And each of those colors and groupings went, of course, alphabetically. Now, the last thing that changed in the format is at the bottom. The copyright and artist were normally left alone. They centered that. So all these changes were the format for quite a while, until 8th edition came out, when they changed some of the format of the cards yet again. So there were 15 card booster packs, and the creature on the pack was Exalted Dragon. There were also, just as the previous two sets, 4 pre-constructed decks were released with Exodus. Now, the pre-release for Exodus was on June 6, 1998, and the promo card with the pre-release was Monstrous Hound. Now, the storyline of it takes that the crew of the Weatherlight has now saved Captain Tisay and their friends, and they've recovered the pieces of the legacy that were in this plane, and they are escaping to a portal which will take them out of Rath. In the meantime, during this time, Volrath takes his general and is beginning to mount an assault against them to counterattack them, managing to break in and steal stuff back from them effectively and recover the hostages. Unfortunately, he's besieged by a combined army of the Elves of Skyshroud and a combined force of the Kor, Val, and Dek human tribes that were reunited by Gerald. So these two armies together are now assaulting his fortress, preventing him from mounting a decent counterattack and once again attack upon the skyship Weatherlight and its crew. In the meantime, they have to deal with the fact that Krovax has changed, and this dark change in him, this bloodthirst, this lust for blood is threatening to destroy the ship. And of course, then they also have to worry about the fact that poor Urtai was left alone over where the portal would be, and he's attempting to open it by himself. So as his friends are breaking everybody out of the stronghold, by the time they return to him, it is his plan to open up this portal, and he will not fail it. Unfortunately, things don't end up well for both Krovax and Urtai, but that's for another set to talk about. Regardless, the end of the story takes place with them escaping in the portal and traveling to yet another plane, where the storyline will continue in a couple of sets from now. Now, the set evolved, once again, Shadow and Buyback, but it also did add two more listens in. So this wasn't the end set of listens. Now, as for the cycles that were in the block, there were 2 cycles. There was a cycle of Keepers. The Keepers were creatures that, once you were behind on certain type of resource, you could pay them mana, tap them, and you would be granted some of said resource. Effectively, when you were behind at something, in a negative dire straits, they would give you something. Intrinsically linked to the Keepers were the Oaths. Oaths were enchantments that gave similar effects to the Keepers, but rather on each player's turn, if any of those players were deficient in a resource that an opponent had more of, then the Oath gave them a boost. So it wasn't just you for the Oath. So, moving on, the pre-constructed decks. Now, the pre-constructed decks, they contain cards from the entire block, so both Stronghold, Tempest, and Exodus combined, and there was something unique about them. The booklets inside not only told you about the techniques and little tricks you could use for using the deck that was provided, but it provided a list of cards that you could add and change in the deck with to make it a more advanced version of the same deck. So effectively, it gave you a list of things that weren't included that you could add into this deck, changing it, making it a more powerful and more advanced version of it. So you had effectively a easy, more beginner of some kind of concept of a deck, and then a more advanced, more powerful version of the same concept. Now, the 4 decks were, there was a blue deck called Dominator, a black-red called Groundbreaker, a white-red called White Heat, and a blue-black called Widowmaker. Now, again, similar to the last set, there were a number of reprints in this set from Portal. Now, let's talk about some of the famous cards from this set. There's Coat of Arms. Coat of Arms is an artifact that when it's in play, that you look at each creature, and for every other creature that shares a type with that creature, that the first creature gets +1/+1. So if you have, let's say, 4 elves out, since one of my elves would get +3/+3 because there are 3 other elves out in play. Creatures that had multiple types, both would apply, so things could get boosted really big. Coat of Arms is actually still pretty useful in theme decks today. The second one I want to talk about is City of Traders. City of Traders, when it came into play, you sacrificed the land. It's tapped for 2 colorless. There was Hatred. You paid the mana cost, you played it, you paid X life. Whatever that X is, target creature gets +X/+0 until end of turn, where X is the amount of life you paid. So you could pay a whole bunch of life to boost up one of your creatures till end of turn. The Nullbridge. For 2 and tapping it, you can discard your entire hand and counter target non-creature spell. So I can trade my hand to counter a spell. There's Oath of Druids. At the beginning of each player's upkeep, if a target player controls more creatures than you, or if an opponent does, you reveal cards from your library until you revealed a creature, put it into play, put the rest of the cards into your graveyard. So everybody would just throw out creatures. It's not bad for a creature-heavy deck. There's Reoccurring Nightmare. You can sacrifice a creature, return Reoccurring Nightmare, an enchantment, to your hand, and then you can return target creature from your graveyard to play. So if you have some creatures to sacrifice, you can continue to play Reoccurring Nightmare, sacrifice those creatures, return the card to your hand, put a creature from your graveyard into play. Spiked Cannibal, the ultimate anti-counter, anti-spike creature there. It's a 0/0, comes into play with a 1/1/1 counter, similar to every spike, that they are 0/0s that get counters. When it comes to play, you move all +1/+1 counters from all creatures in play to it. So it drains +1/+1 counters from everything. There's Wall of Nets. It's a 0/7 wall. At the end of any combat, you remove from the game any creature that Wall of Nets blocked. If Wall of Nets should be removed from play, those creatures come back into play. So effectively, as long as Wall of Nets is in play, it can remove anything that it blocks from the game. As soon as it goes away, those things come back. There's Survival of the Fittest. For 1 green mana, you can discard a creature card from your hand, search your library for a creature card, reveal it, put it in your hand, and then shuffle your library. So you could switch a creature you had in your hand that you don't need at all for one that you could actually use. Mind Over Matter. It's an enchantment. You can discard a card to tap or untap target artifact, creature, or land. There's Allay. It's a pretty decent buyback spell. 3 mana to buy back, destroy target enchantment. If you want to destroy a lot of enchantments in an enchantment destruction deck or something like a white deck, it's actually pretty decent. Equilibrium is an enchantment that whenever you successfully cast a creature spell, you may pay 1 to return target creature to its owner's hand. So you can continue to throw out creatures that you successfully are casting from your hand to return other creatures to their owner's hands. Urtai, Wizard of Death. He counts as a wizard, he's a 1/1, and for 2 colors, 2 blue, you can tap him to counter a spell, counts as an instant. Fugue. Target player discards 3 cards of their choice. Pretty decent for a discard deck. High Ground. Your creatures can block 1 additional creature during each defense. So effectively, you make sure that your 1 creature, rather than just blocking 1 creature, can now block 2 creatures if you really wanted them to. Memory Crystal. All buybacks are reduced by 2. So if you have a lot of buyback cards in your deck, it's pretty decent. Mary Cat Warrior. She's a 2/3, counts as a cat. She has First Strike, Vigilance, and Forest Walk. Pretty decent for the amount of mana to cast. There's Plague Bearer. It's a 1/1 for XX and a black. You can destroy target non-black creature with a casting cost of X. So if you pay whatever thing's casting cost twice and 1 black mana, you can destroy it, as long as it's not black. Reconnaissance. For 0, it's an enchantment. For 0 mana, you can remove target attacking creature from combat. It deals nor receives combat damage this turn. So I could attack with a whole lot of creatures, and after any of them have blocked. So if I've already waited till blockers have been declared, I can remove ones that my creatures that were attacking that were blocked from combat, meaning the unblocked ones will still do damage. The ones that had been blocked, they're okay, they're fine. I've got them as blockers for my next turn, and they're also just removed from the threat of taking damage at all. Shattering Pulse. It's a red spell. It's exactly like a Lay, but for artifacts. 3 mana buyback. You can cast it to destroy target artifact of your choice. So it is pretty much the exact same thing, but red and for artifacts. Soltari Visionary. It's a 2/2 shadow. I wanted to mention this one because when he deals damage to a player, not combat damage, you can destroy an enchantment they control. So if you had a way of making him deal damage that doesn't involve combat, you could destroy enchantments someone controlled, or you could just attack them and it's a shadow creature anyway and get rid of enchantments they have. Soul Warden. This is a classic one. It's a 1/1, and whenever another creature comes into play, you gain 1 life. This is one of the first creatures that gains life when other creatures came into play. There's a number of them that have come out, but this is the first and original. Spellbook. It's an artifact that costs you 0 mana to play. You skip your discard phase, meaning at the end of your turn, you don't discard cards. It's a more interesting way of saying you have no maximum hand size, but rather than, if you have no maximum number of cards in your hand, you still have a maximum. It's just the point in time where you would discard cards doesn't exist. So therefore, any time that something comes up during that phase, you don't have that phase. Advantage and disadvantage to having the no maximum hand size, no discard. So that's it for today. I introduced you to the last set of the Rath cycle, Exodus. I talked about a little bit about its stories, that in fact that it just expanded upon the previous things, mechanics and keywords from the previous sets, and that itself had a number of interesting cards, which some of them are actually still pretty useful today. So if you have any questions, comments, anything we're saying, anything you think I left out, please leave in the comments below. Please like, share, and subscribe so you support the channel, the Empire, and the work I do. And until the next time, I bid you farewell.